So my name is Daniel Rowland. I am a producer and audio engineer for about the past 25 years. I'll do a bunch of different stuff. I'm a college professor. I work on building a lot of technology as well. So I'm kind of all over the place. Anything around music and music tech I'm passionate about, but particularly about supporting young creators. And I build a lot of technology for that, which is how I discovered Audiotool. I was showing my own students, kind of the best cloud DAWs and ways that they could interface with music without having to spend a lot of money, where there's good communities to support them. And I've been doing that for the past 10 years. And I eventually came on board with Audiotool as a co-founder. So now I'm part of the company, really kind of helping to steer the ship about the future and where we're going, which is pretty exciting. The two things that impress me about Audiotool still impress me today, which is A, the community aspect of it, right? Because that's something you can't build, right? That has to happen somewhat organically. You can't buy that. The other part was the way that the software works. I was a big fan of Reason back in the day, so the idea that you could visually, if you're not familiar with what that is, it's a DAW and a sequencer where you could connect things. So you could, music production can be very cerebral for people if you can't tangibly see where signal is going from one place to another. Like, I'm a guitar player, I have a bunch of guitar pedals, I have to connect them together and I know where the signal's going and it's very intuitive. Most software doesn't work that way, but Audiotool does, right? So it was much more digestible for my students to learn that than a Pro Tools or an FL Studio or an Ableton, at least at the start, because it's very visual, man. And I think it's a unique layout, and that leads to you being able to do very unique sound design and signal routing configurations that in a DAW would be very tough and then very tough to follow once you did them, whereas an Audiotool, I think it's much cooler. So that's the big thing that kind of drew me to it. You can only really do this in Audiotool, right? Where the challenge was, don't use the timeline. That means you're not able to record audio or pull in audio loops. You're not able to sequence MIDI in the traditional way. You cannot use a linear timeline and hit play and have it go. You have to put in all these modules and, whether via sequencers or via self-resonating filters or whatever you want to do, you have to create something, right? It's the foundation of a lot of electronic music production is those type of tools, right? Like the 303 is an example, or I love the Tenorion and these other things that the tone matrix is kind of based on. If you're not recording in a timeline, you're actually entering things in on an actual instrument itself. When I heard that challenge, I was like, oh, people will do something, kind of interesting. But then when you see what people actually did, it's insane. Not just to build like a 4-bar loop or an 8-bar loop, but full arrangements using, in some cases, like 100+ delay pedals that are all timed out to trigger things at different times. I consider myself a pretty advanced producer and engineer, and I would have never thought, I don't think I would have ever thought to do that. It's mind-blowing. That's what's so cool about the platform, again, because then you look at these configurations and visually it looks like a work of art. The other thing that I think is cool about Audiotool is everyone's using the same stuff, right? No one can afford a better plugin than somebody else. Everyone gets the same tools. So I can look at something like one of these projects I'm talking about, and I can go do that, right? I can reverse engineer that because I have all the same stuff that they had. Yeah, without question. If you're just starting out making music, what is an insert, right? What is the concept of busing something versus inserting an effect between a drum machine and a mixer, as an example, if you want distortion or EQ, right? It's fine in a traditional DAW, you're looking at a kind of a top-down channel strip and you're inserting something and you can kind of talk through the workflow with people, but in Audiotool, literally they connect the cables. I've noticed, and again, over a decade plus of teaching this, that's the thing that like the light bulb goes off. It's funny because then they wish that DAWs worked that way. Even if it was like a traditional DAW, but I could hit a button and flip into that view and have that fun kind of, workspace, which also is fun collaboratively too, when other people can be involved in doing that stuff in real time. It's a completely different, as Audiotool grows and we kind of dial in and improve it and do all sorts of stuff, that's the thing we don't want to lose, right? The ability to do that, because I think it's one of the things that makes it unique. This is silly. It's one of the probably the simplest device in Audiotool, which is the tone matrix. But I just grew up loving the Tenorion so much, which if you don't know what that is, it's a handheld square where you push buttons and you can sequence in different ways and really, almost physics-based stuff where you can have a note move around and bounce into another note and fly off. And the tone matrix can do some of that, not all of that, but maybe we'll, work on that in the future. But I find that kind of stuff super fun, and being able to pull up presets or even just draw a picture. I mean, people draw all sorts of ridiculous stuff in the tone matrix. I'm a big fan of, I won't say generative music, but like randomization is part of what I'm doing to help me come up with stuff that I would have never thought of. So just the ability, silly as this sounds, to just click around on something, right? And then run it through a bunch of stuff and come up with ideas that I wouldn't have otherwise come up with. Now, there's a bunch of other stuff. The Heisenberg, I would love to have a hardware version of the Heisenberg as an example. Yeah, I mean, so I would say that, but there's a lot of stuff in there that's super cool because some of it's based upon real world devices already, right? Like we were talking about the 909 and 303, and then other stuff exists completely uniquely to Audiotool. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind having my whole studio. We should work on that, just a whole studio of physical audio tool gear. Right now, and this is something I think will be solved pretty soon, as basic as it is a sampler. I think the one thing I would like to have in Audiotool is more real-world, multi-sampled sounds, and something that certainly will be on the way, you know, because that's something we expect, right? You come to, in any DAW, you would expect to have that. And not just a one-shot kind of multi-sampled thing, but also loop-based sampling too, similar to Output Arcade or LANDR's Chromatic or something like that, I think would be super fun, where you can give people more flexibility with the content that they have very easily, right? Where it's like you hit a couple of buttons, you get some, take yourself outside of the box of what you would normally do with a loop as an example. I think that type of stuff is super key. And there's some of that stuff in Audiotool now, but really compartmentalizing it inside a sampler I think would be cool. Yes. As long as they sound good. So, you know, and these days, and you know, there's a whole world opening up that we all have to talk about as far as what we're going to do, not just in Audiotool, but in modern, you know, desktop DAWs, which is, it's not just, you know, a sampler, it's MIDI, it's generative MIDI, it's audio, it's generative audio, right? We are in the Wild West right now of something that will completely change the way we all make music. I'm not sure there's an analogy to it. I mean, maybe when we went from analog to digital, but this is even bigger than that. And it comes around the AI side of things. So that's something I specialize in and have for about 10 years. And part of my involvement with Audiotool is to try to like pick and ask the community what they want, things that support all of us and don't replace all of us, right? And I think that also plays into the loops and the samples and the MIDI horns and all of that, because now there's a multitude of ways to generate that stuff that is not just have a MIDI sequence triggering some samples. Yeah, lots of stuff to work on. It's pretty exciting. Well, first of all, just for everyone who's been around for a minute, like I'm fairly new, so I've been teaching Audiotool, right, for a while, but like as far as really engaging with the community, I'm relatively new to that. And I think it is legitimately the most creative community I have ever seen of music makers. And just much respect to everybody who's been involved in that. And if you haven't made music in a while on Audiotool, please come back and do it. If you are, keep it coming, because things are on the horizon that I think everybody is going to be super excited about with this platform. Yeah, so just kind of keep your ears to the ground, pay attention to what's going on, because we have some exciting stuff to share with you. If I could box any awesome, dude, there's this one long-haired, red-headed cat, like, who is just, he thinks he's all that, you know. It's Naswalt, is that his name? Yeah, that guy. He's talented, but man, his ego is just all over the place.